Welcome to the SEO Insider with your host, Seth Price, founder of BluShark, taking you inside the world of legal marketing and all things digital.
Welcome, everybody. We're so excited to be here on the Insider today with Shaun and Krystal Burroughs. Welcome, guys.
Hey, thank you so much, Seth. Glad to be here.
So, look, I know you guys both from the law firm side as well as the sort of review side. Talk to me a little bit about what you guys have done in the review space.
Absolutely. Krystal, why don't you kick us off here?
So Shaun and I own a review management software company that our primary vertical is law. We've been in this space about 10 years now. What led us to this was owning a publishing company and the changes that began happening over a decade ago in the space and why they were not converting the way they previously had. And reviews became the answer. And it led us down the rabbit hole of review management software.
Gotcha. And, look, there's a lot of platforms out there, sort of corporate ones, some invested by Google, et cetera. What are the differences in review management platforms? You've heard of Bird Eye and these others. Remember there was originally Get 5 Stars and then they changed their name. At the end of the day, what is it that the review management platforms can provide for a law firm?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the first thing I think is really automation, Seth, as you can imagine today with any one of the case management softwares, if it's Smart Advocate, FileVine, with APIs, most softwares today can link to that. But I think what Krystal and I bring to the table, at least to help in the industry, is I've been working with law firms for 9 years exclusively as a consultant for marketing and operations. So taking the best practices from the law firms we work around the country and really focusing on that has been very, very helpful. So the platforms vary. There's platforms that are very inexpensive, which you're familiar with, and there's also ones that are very expensive out there. And I think a lot of it, what it really comes down to are the features that are offered by each one of those platforms. But if it really comes down to it, Seth, it's just automation. We rely so much, with a law firm of any size, they have a lot on their plate. So the last thing they need to worry about is asking and gathering reviews for multiple sites, and specifically Google. So
How do you, assume that with automation, is this mostly text focused as far as getting people text messages to ask for reviews, or how do you navigate? Historically, people did emails. It just doesn't seem to convert nearly as well as text messages.
great question. Krystal, why don't you handle that?
So, email, text, MMS are all possible in the platform. We like to approach it from all angles. So we recommend that you're gathering email and text. We can utilize both. We see how you perform because it does vary around the country and it does vary within the industry to some degree. PI is very different, for instance, than criminal law. Criminal law, they see their clients at court. They can have a business card with a QR code and simply give them the business card so they can give the review there. We recommend that you have it at your office, the tap to scan technology, so they can tap and scan QR codes there. If someone's coming again in PI where they would come in and receive their check, that's a great opportunity, person to person doing it. So having a breath across all the different ways is gonna give you the best advantage of getting the most reviews and the best quality reviews, really.
What are the differences between the different platforms? You said sort of there's some are cheap, some are expensive. What are the features that make something more expensive versus less expensive?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, some of the platforms, like our platform, has video testimonials as well, and also the advanced connections with Google. So we have a two-way API with Google, so we see a lot that pulls through Google business profiles, for example. We have some SEO checks.
What does this mean? So basically you and or other platforms are, when you say an API, are you sending something other than just a generic link to post? What are you sending somebody when they go to post?
We can. Great question.
So with a two-way API, we are pushing data to Google and Google is pushing data to us. So for instance, we would have the Google Analytics from your Google My Business profile.
But that's not the review itself. That's how often it's getting clicked or directions and things like
exactly.
that.
So
with the reviews itself, what is it? Is there an API component to pushing the review to Google, or are you just giving a link that's going to the Google Business profile?
That's kind of a two-part. It is a link, but it is specific to the fact that we have an API connection. With that API connection, that direct link is also allowing you to immediately respond from within the platform. So rather than having to utilize, we'll just use Google for example, rather than having to log in to do things with your Google account or send a specific link from that, the platform is managing all of that. The links are coming through, and then that link is allowing you, once the review is placed, to respond to that review immediately from the platform and also receive immediate notification on those reviews.
So you're basically able to see the reviews in a more elegant manner than if you just had to go to each platform. And that's something that most of so is there anything with this? One of the things that I see lawyers complain about a lot is the links change. And that if you had a link, they eventually stop working as far as the review links. Is this constantly monitoring and updating that to make sure that the links are functional?
Correct, because with a true live API connection with Google, we don't have those issues because we are in a constant communication with that platform.
Got you. One of the things that I've struggled with, and I think the lawyers have struggled with, is if you're a modest sized practice. Now, like Shaun works with a very large firm with lots of different lawyers, but for a firm that might have 2, 3, 4 lawyers, they don't get that many opportunities for reviews. And when you see this automation, you go to Jiffy Lube. How many cars do they see a day? Let's say they saw 200 cars a day. And let's say they get 2% of all those cars to leave a review. That's 4 reviews a day. 4 reviews times 365. You got some decent review count. But if you are a law firm, you can't have a 2% conversion rate or you're in a lot of trouble. You really need something. What's your feeling as far as the sort of balance between automation, which is great, and it's better than not having it, versus the human touch, which is, hey, I worked with this particular paralegal or this particular lawyer. I love them. And when they're making the ask, it's different than when it's just an automated bot sort of asking for it.
Yeah, absolutely. What really is you can imagine a combination of everything. So in the law firm, driving that culture to always ask, provide exceptional client service. So what we recommend is ask throughout the entire process. What we have found that you have just as much success getting an online review at intake, Seth, than you do throughout the process. So a good cadence might be intake, a couple weeks after intake to make sure that handoff is smooth, at the 12-month mark, at the 24-month mark if necessary, and then also at the end, also when the case closes. So those are the times that we ask through automation. Obviously, lots of flexibility. It's up to the client. But if you really want to take it to the next level and you're confident you're providing excellent service, a lot of our clients put a link also in their email signatures. So you have it in your email signature, you have maybe a QR code on your business card, a QR code at the front desk potentially. So the more you ask and the better service you provide, it's amazing the volume of reviews. We had one client that we started with that had 40 reviews. Today they have over a couple thousand. And why that is important for lots of reasons, but why it's important in the legal industry is that same client was getting about 40 to 45 phone calls from their Google properties back 7, 8 years ago. Last month, they had over 1,300 phone calls just on their Google properties. So as you're aware, owning an SEO company, local search is everything right now. And not only is Google critical, but one of the points I want to make sure we get across today is to spread it across other review sites as well. And we found tremendous success around the country with law firms that not only focus on Google, but spread their love to Yelp, spread it out to Facebook, put it on Avvo, put it on lawyers.com. And it's a lot easier to do that with a software that has one dashboard that you can monitor all that, and then you could share all of that across social media.
Okay, well, let me push back on this for a minute. Look, I struggle with it. I don't have an answer, but it sounds great to say, hey, you should spread the love, but it's so hard to get a Google review. And given that Avo, unless you have a paid profile, isn't even showing the contact information, and given that Yelp in certain markets doesn't get a lot of love outside of like the Silicon Valley, the California markets, it sounds great, or is this something an ongoing thing, or just enough to make sure that you have a baseline? What is the advantage of filling the beast with these compared to the value of the Google review, where they're looking for cadence of reviews, they're looking for numbers and quality, all these things. Is there really value getting them? I'm pushing back, say, what is the value going to these other platforms, and how have you played that out?
So Seth, I can speak to this in a so kind of a two-part on this. You're 100% right on the cadence. I would rather see a client get one review per week, every week, rather than get 20 in 1 month and nothing for 6 months. So always that is top. Responding to the reviews is critical. That I could go an hour on that one.
Let me just interject. Do you think that there's if you're trying to challenge a negative review, does it make harder to bring it down if you respond versus trying to get a non-legitimate review removed before responding?
We always tell clients to put a pause on. So if you want to have a review removed, you're flagging it for a violation, never respond to that review.
Right.
Always go through the process before you would respond. We tell people, when you respond, think about it like this. You're responding to a potential future client. You're not responding to the person who's upset with you. They're never going to be a client again anyway. So always think about it in that frame, and the way that you respond to that review is for a future potential client. Really.
Couldn't agree more. I think that's brilliant. The piece that I am always that I'm always struggling with this world has been telling people, hey, it's a 24-hour rule. Wait for your emotions to calm down, because this is like your bar license is still in line. You don't want to make it worse by agitating that person. Plus, if you think it's a non-legitimate review that you want to get removed, you certainly want to put a pause on it, in my opinion, as well as yours. So, it's all of that together. But do you see real value? I'm pushing back to say, are you seeing any clients where there's meaningful case acquisition from these other tools where you're spreading the love on reviews?
Yes. We absolutely are. So would you like to? Yeah. So we'll talk about that. So for a couple different things, and this is new to all of us, but if you go out and you search your own law firm or any other law firm on, let's just use ChatGPT, for example. Pew Research last month just came out and said that 23% of adult Americans utilize ChatGPT. So, and you can search for what's the best law firm, who has the best reviews. And ironically, and there may be a reason for this, is you're not going to get results that come through Google. You only get results that come through third parties. I was shocked doing this research, Seth, on something like Super Lawyers, for example, which you may or not agree that that's a directory you want to pay for, or do the free version. But that's popping up. That popped up on both Perplexity, and it also popped up on ChatGPT when I ran that search a couple of weeks ago.
And some of it, I'm guessing, shockingly, Gemini probably takes more advantage of Google reviews,
right?
Right. So like you're sort of seeing that. That's one of the reasons why I feel like Google actually pushed back on ChatGPT content so hard on the SEO side, was they were not investors in this. They didn't want, they're not looking for that. Again, that world's evolving quickly. So is the review world, because at some point, if they keep showing nonsensical Yelp reviews that don't give a true picture of stuff, ChatGPT is going to learn that it's not particularly valuable. And that's one of the reasons why, when I get the question, like, what should I do to show up on ChatGPT? It's a moving target right now. We don't know where that's going to stop. And so, putting a ton of resources into something right now, you want to be best practice of SEO generally pay dividends. But you are correct. Things like Super Lawyers and other directories short term have had a huge bump. Curious to see where that stays long term.
Yeah, even this morning, Seth, lawyers.com and Justia pulled up, right? So that's good, solid, basic foundation for SEO.
But to be fair, they also show up in Google search results. So it's not like
And you do.
They do. Justia is extremely powerful. So that's there. I had a couple of sort of review things I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on. So when sculpting reviews, what are your thoughts? Google's made a big deal out of gateways, not wanting people to sort of put a pre-question on the website. Did you have a good experience? And only yeses get reviews. That's not new news. But what are your thoughts? The piece, clearly you can't incentivize for reviews based on guidelines, but law firms, and we've talked a little bit about this offline, Shaun, law firms very often want to incentivize their staff to be motivated to make the ask. Ironically, I got a call from a New York Times reporter last weekend. There's an article about the mass tort space and whether intake people should be incentivized to sign cases. And my philosophy was, I don't do a lot of that, but I also don't have a problem with it, because at the end of the day, the law firm is going to determine if it's a viable case, regardless of whether somebody signs it up in real time. Pivoting back to this, what are your thoughts on incentivization, bonuses, or some sort of lottery to remind and incentivize people that this is an important thing for the firm?
Absolutely. I've seen it all, Seth, and you probably have too. So I some of the best case study, I should say, was when you do a contest and you get people excited and then they realize they can do it, and then the contest is gone and they're not doing it anymore. There's opportunity there for coaching for your staff to make sure that it's part of the expectation, it's part of their job, right? But as far as compensating for every review that comes in, if you're going to compensate, and that's a huge debate out there. I've seen people do $25 for a review to $100 for a review. I haven't seen much higher than that. But the one thing I would strongly recommend is, if you're going to compensate for it, get something out of it. So what we try to coach the law firms we work with is, make sure if you're going to get compensated, make sure they use keywords that mention the employees, that mention the firm, that mention the type of case it was. Because all of those, in the Google algorithms, that helps local search as well as traditional SEO. So it really is a coin toss on if you want to compensate, because I have law firms that are hands down, absolutely not. It's part of your job. But the law firms that throw a little bit towards it, I find that they do, at the end of the day, they do have better results, Seth.
Right. But so Krystal, I mean, to me, part of what I've seen is that nothing works forever. It's, and it's sort of the mixing it up so that if a contest 1 month, well, if you knew you're not going to win the contest, you're out. Maybe a weighted contest where every review gets a lottery ticket, sort of like the NBA draft. But like, what have you seen as sort of the most successful combinations? Understand that you may have to continue to mix it up, but any incentivization programs or just gimmicks that have worked well at law firms in order to sort of get people galvanized on this issue?
So I think the biggest thing that I would say, as far as the continuum of it working, is feedback is critical. So not just asking for those reviews. When you let someone know that you actually want to hear their voice, they are much more incentivized to give you a review. So by asking a client throughout the process of their case, particularly PI, because of the length of it, you're almost guaranteeing in those couple year span of being with that client, you are going to get a review from them. The beauty of someone like that, if they give you a Google intake, then you can go back and ask for that lawyers.com or that Yelp review or that Facebook review. So having that initial start out with, I want to hear from you, and changing it up. So we recommend from clients, in the beginning, they have very little to say to you. A happy, sad face. Was it great or was it terrible? Let us know. And then beyond that, it's like the constant check-in. And then once you're getting that positive feedback, then you can send them on to those review sites without feeling concerned that you're asking someone you have no idea how they actually feel about you for a review.
I mean, yeah. Go ahead. That's a good point. But to get a Google review, you need a Gmail email, right? So
right. I was just saying, and the corollary is, do you send people to Yelp unless you know they're an active Yelper? Because otherwise, the reviews are just going to be, put below the fold.
So depending on the client and where they're located, our West Coast clients, we do have Yelp as a secondary and sometimes third after Facebook. So utilizing a software, reputation management software, you can have as many review sites on it as you want. We recommend no more than 4. But if someone doesn't have a Gmail account, wouldn't you rather get a BBB or a Facebook and a Yelp instead of losing the review altogether? And we're finding that way, Seth, that's how we grow those other directories and those other review sites outside of Google.
So I'll sort of, bring back and sort of wrap up with sort of, I think one of the most interesting things that's happened of late, which is, we've seen Google focus on reviews for the first time. People would talk about fake reviews for a long time. I'm sure you've seen people that are battling it in Florida where you see people doing thousands of reviews and you're just like, they're all from out of state or people, the mega firms opening new offices where all the reviews are coming from Florida, those types of things. So Google's clearly said, hey, we know that this is a problem and we want to clean it up, because with the advent of ChatGPT, all of a sudden the Google reviews are a differentiator and they need to be trusted. So obviously we talked a lot about, I think we talked about offline, people being labeled with that scarlet letter of, bad reviews on the site. Like nobody wants to have that. But, one of the things that I noticed, and we talked a little bit prior to this podcast, was that in the whole kerfluffle of the quote unquote, glitch, that I think my theory, which is not shared by a lot of the glitterati of local search, is that Google, whether intentional or not, showed us they know where the dubious reviews are. That a lot of reviews, there were 2 issues, right? Review count. Yeah, they'll figure out how to count. But that what we saw was that Google knew where dubious reviews were, where there were patterns. And while they may have come back now, to me, this is analogous to the spammy links of years ago. They're saying, absolutely, we know where this is. Continue to do this at your peril. What are your thoughts on what did we learn from the glitch?
Yeah, no doubt. Well, the one thing I see is consistency, right? If you're a law firm that's getting 2 a week and all of a sudden you start getting 20 a week, that's going to throw a flag. The other thing, which has historically been around, and I've seen companies outside of the legal industry lose all their Google reviews overnight, is they would do something innocently like taking an iPad and putting it at the front desk of one of their offices, Seth, and Google knows the IP address. So if you're trying to get Google reviews, you might get a handful of them, but before you know it, you can get flagged and you can lose those as well. So those are the 2 huge takeaways. So is there anything else, Krystal, that you saw?
And we've seen it with some of our clients that have call centers, for instance. They have multiple locations. The call center's at one location, intake's asking for all the reviews. That one location, outside of all the other locations, is getting dozens a week, where the other locations maybe are only getting 1 or 2. It's totally looks out of whack for Google. And we saw them pull down, so we know.
Yeah, and they were pulled down. Yeah, and
right. And so I just think that this is like, there was a lot to be learned from this, and understanding some people got reviews back. Many people did. But to me, they weren't, my co-host on the law firm Blueprint, he had 14 disappear. I think most of them came back that were all done in a conference room out of state with other lawyers, right?
Yeah.
You knew what, and look, great, they came back, but Google has circled this and said, I think at some level, they're saying, here's a baseline. We know what's dubious, what's not, but going forward, if not, we don't know. For all we know, there will be some sort of, penalty going, looking back. They just weren't ready for it there. But certainly, I think the buyer beware right now, because those spikes are being, they clearly understand it. They're seeing it. And the data that we got across 300 clients was glaring in that this was not like, yes, there's a glitch. I get it. But the glitch was exposing that they are now looking very carefully at those patterns that other local geeks have seen for years. Somebody said, oh, look at this. And I'm like, oh, I never realized that a friend had his entire staff review my firm. Did I ask for it? No. But like 10 people out of state all reviewed a profile, within a, I don't know if it was within an IP address, but like there are patterns. Now, thousands of reviews, so it's just a small number, and you forget about it. You think you're squeaky clean, and yet there's always weird stuff from the past that, in the link world, we went through a disavow period. I kind of get the impression Google is going to punt and look at stuff going forward. But I think they've sort of tipped their hat that they have focused on this and that they are well aware of what is a pattern and what is not.
It was definitely a shot over the bow. I mean, I'm with you 100% on your thoughts. I mean, I think you're spot on with that, Seth. Well, I know we're a little tight on time, but there's a couple other things I want to talk
Please.
about. You can have a lot of great reviews, but at the end of the day, if they're not showing up in maps, unless someone's searching for your law firm, you're not going to be found, right? So a goal for local search, right? Google business profiles, let's get seen. So I know this isn't an SEO class because you guys are the experts in it, but what we have noticed is our law clients that are taking questions doing Google questions. They're they're
The
posting to
Q&A is
Google.
big.
The Q&A is big. The Q&A didn't even really exist a year ago as far as anything that's showing up that we see in algorithms. And it's that engagement, right? And we talked about those responses. You do want to ultimately respond to all reviews, but to our point earlier, because I'm trying to do some takeaways for your folks there that are listening, is you have to try to fix the issue first, because people can go in and they go in and they change that 1 star to a 5 star. So let's provide excellent client service. And at the end of the day, you're going to win at the end of the day. So,
Well, right. Well, I think it's table stakes, because if it's not, that's when, look, bad reviews come. They're going to come no matter what, right? Some are going to be fictitious, some will be competitors, but some are going to be legitimate. And looking at the sausage making, if the sausage making is no good, or you have a weak link, if you have 20 paralegals, that means you have a 20th worst paralegal. Like, what's your quality control like? And are you, and knowing, like, looking introspectively rather than I got a bad review and, how could this person do this, to did I live up to expectations? And the truth is very often somewhere in the middle.
and it's true. It's funny. Not that I would agree to this, but we, in a different industry, we had a client that had over 100 locations that we were managing, and they didn't even care about the reviews that much. They wanted to know the feedback, how their employees are doing, and I got a kick out of it. But you know what? Once their staff knew that they were being, I don't want to say watched because that probably sounds bad, but once they know that their client service or customer service in this case was being monitored, the customer service went through the roof. So.
Right. But look, to me, that's a missed opportunity. Shouldn't wait till the end of the thing is done. You get the negative review. That's why, we're always looking at net promoter scores, and we're sending out surveys. And look, the hardest thing is to find something that people will respond to. But if you're doing great work, the whole gateway concept goes away.
Yeah,
Everybody's a potential review. Now, also knowing where you have real issues, look, some people are impossible to keep happy with anything in life. And sometimes you have real issues internally, but looking out for where your weak links are and constantly improving. I think it's sort of fun, hysterical that somebody's using Google as that feedback. But if that's the case, just send your own stuff out. Like, it doesn't, like, the idea is, if somebody's gotten to the point where they're leaving you a negative review at the end, that's not a good place to be. And there are clients that come to me and they have a 3.5 rating. And I'm like, okay, like, you got to go look internally. Like, no local expert is going to solve your problem.
No software is going to.
We're not miracle workers. I tell people that all the time.
Yeah,
exactly. Our job is to amplify what is there and minimize perhaps, a blemish. But, if it's not great, if it's not great service, you're in the end of the day not going to do it. And, it's funny. Have you guys read Unreasonable Hospitality? One of the hot business books out there right now. It talks about 11 Madison Avenue and how it went from a great restaurant to #1 in the world. And, it was champagne on a birthday, and some guy didn't have a hot dog before leaving New York, and they ran out, got a hot dog and chopped it up and put in quarters in the parking meter when that was a thing. And all of that's great. But part of that comes down to the resources of the firm. And if your paralegals have 150 cases in pre-lit, you're not going to be able to give great service, and you're going to see the reviews go down. If you're at 80 cases per paralegal, then you could actually have a fighting chance to give great service. And and so part of it is resources allowed, and that's from the top based on how you're going to allow that to be allocated.
Yeah, absolutely. And final thought on that. That is really why your firm, it doesn't really matter the size of the firm. The automation piece is so key. We're going to hope that our employees are providing great client service. But just by asking enough people, Seth, you get reviews. So, and by having a system that you're able to follow and track and respond easily, regardless of what company you use, I think is huge. So, because I mean, we have one client. easily 5 to 7 of their customers, clients, we save each month because we get feedback, right? We get feedback letting, hey, I haven't heard from you, or I left a message and I'm not getting response back. So where in the old days, those clients would just go to another law firm or just go away entirely, where today we find that our clients are able to save clients every single month. And that's not even talking about, as you know, the conversions on the front side, right? Because social proof, everybody wants to see what everybody else
It's a
do,
cultural
so.
thing, to your point. If
It
your
is,
if your
definitely.
employees are not doing their job, it's going to be exposed. So continually asking and having that filter, so to speak, where you're going to hear about it before Google hears about it is always what we recommend, because you need that line of communication if you're really going to end up with someone who's happy enough to give you that beautiful paragraph. Nobody wants just 5 stars. We need something said.
Yeah,
So
with a nice comment, right? The
Yeah.
comments convert. Stars.
That's awesome. Well, then that's I'll leave it with that. That's words to live by, right? You could do all the automation you want, but if the sausage making isn't high quality, it's not gonna
Matter.
produce that same
Yes.
loving paragraph.
Absolutely.
yes.
Well, thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate the conversation, and hopefully get to connect at some conference in the near future.
That sounds great.
Thanks
Thanks,
so much,
Beth.
Seth.
You have a great
Appreciate
day.
it.
Take care
Bye-bye.
now.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the SEO Insider with Seth Price. Be sure to check back next week for fresh insights into building your brand's online presence. Episodes are available to stream directly on BluShark Digital's website.